Hear him out. Hi, Father. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be able to connect with you right now on the podcast, no? And I have so many questions and things I want to talk to you about for today. What I found out is that you actually have a pet parrot right now. I've seen that in your posts, in webinars. I've seen this parrot. And what's it like living with the parrot right now?
Well, it's been good for my sanity during this lockdown. Last year, a friend of mine, Butch Campos, gave me this African gray parrot, and I don't know if you know AGPs, but they're supposed to be the most intelligent bird.
Yeah.
And so it was a 1 year old chick when it was given to me. So I've been hand feeding it. But I've been doing a lot of traveling because of my work in Asia Pacific. So what's happened was that after the lockdown, after the lockdown was announced, I obviously spent more time with him, and because of that, it's very tame now, and we're really close. We're really tight now.
That's
So
nice. Does he talk? Because I used to have an African gray parrot as well, but he's old and unfortunately he passed away just last year. So mine could say a few words. So does your parrot talk?
well, he can say hello and nacho. Basically, he's only 2 years old, and I used to have an AGP as well in Xavier School. I don't know if you guys knew about him. His name was Frankie.
Oh, I didn't know
After
that.
Francis Xavier School, right? So,
Okay.
and he was also older when he was given to me, and he was in the Saint Joseph's Garden, if you remember that area. This one's name is Nacho, that which is short for Ignatius of Loyola. So
Right, right. And how has generally this quarantine been for you? Because I know you travel a lot because of your work, as you mentioned. And how is it like, being staying put?
well, two things. First of all, it's been really busy because the Ateneo SALT Institute, SALT stands for the Science and Art of Learning and Teaching. We've been asked to take the lead in training our faculty to prepare for this whole online education thing. No? So we've designed an entire online course, and we've been training over 2,000 teachers in the Jesuit network of schools and universities. So it's been really busy. But on the other hand, I also like the lockdown in the sense that, I'm really an introvert, so I've been really enjoying the solitude, even despite all the work and all the Zoom meetings. Basically, I'm not, always in a crowd as I used to be,
Mhm.
and I kind of like that being an introverted person. So it kind of works for me. I'm just worried about the people who are suffering, and I don't know how long this will last either. So that's the other thing that's on my mind. But for myself, I'm doing pretty well, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely very stressful thinking about what's happening outside, especially when we're very much comfortable sitting down doing our work mostly from home, right, Father?
That's right. Yeah.
And apart from the work that you're doing right now, are there any new hobbies maybe that you developed over this extended stay at home?
Actually, no new hobbies, but I've resuscitated old ones that I've been neglecting. No, because I read somewhere that one fallacy about the pandemic is to expect yourself to be as productive as before.
Right.
But in the new normal, you're not supposed to be so harsh on yourself or so demanding on yourself to
Hmm.
expect the same level of productivity. But you have to be active. So there's a difference between being active and productive, right? So
Yes.
because of that, I've decided to go back to biking. So I've been biking on campus. I've gone back to swimming almost every day.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a lot of work, as far as the online learning training is concerned. So that's what I've been into. I've sort of resuscitated some of my old hobbies like biking and swimming, which I wasn't able to do when I was traveling a lot. So that's been good for me because physically I feel more fit, and mentally also I feel more at peace, no, because of all the activity.
Right. And it's nice to hear, Father, that you're still very active and very engaged physically, at least keeping yourself healthy throughout the quarantine. And I'm actually hoping I could get into more physical activity myself because recently, well, it's hard to build a routine, especially with everything being so uncertain. But it's nice to hear that you have your own routine yourself.
Well, I had to put in the structure for myself because I was also beginning to feel that having such an unstructured life where you work from home, there's really this danger of just working all the time, or just like aside from working, we also sort of try to cope, right? And one go-to coping mechanism I have is just binging on Netflix. So, and
Mm-hmm.
we know that that's a rabbit hole sometimes, right? So I decided after a month that, I better put some structure into my life, and it's worked for me. And I think people should consider adding their own structure, because otherwise we're gonna get lost in the whims and the ups and downs of each day. So I would strongly suggest that you consider doing that, Jeff.
Well, advice taken, Father. I will definitely try to put structure into my life, and I think that's very applicable even beyond the quarantine, giving structure to your day to day. And I think that's something we can all take away from. And now, Father, what I'm curious to know about, I mean, I'm sure everyone wants to know as well, is your background. Uh, I understand that your background is initially is in psychology, was in psychology, and later on in your life you had different sorts of jobs, different kinds of work. And I'm really curious, how did psychology lead to, well, first communication? Because I know you did some time in JESCOM, which is Jesuit Communications, right, Father?
Right, right, that's right. I did 4 years there.
Okay, so how did that sort of happen?
Well, I wish I could come up with a good answer, but the reason why I took up psychology in college is that I didn't really know what to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And looking back now, I think that was a clear sign that maybe I was meant for a religious vocation. But I was very much in denial that I didn't want to consider that. So I thought, why don't I go into psychology? Because I could be a counselor, or I could go into industrial psychology, do HR training or organizational development. At that time, OD was new and was a big thing. So I went into psychology for that reason. And after college, a group of friends from Xavier, we decided, why don't we go back to Xavier and just chill and enjoy ourselves, and just sort of teach. So I ended up being a counselor the first year. I was in Xavier School right after college. And then after that, I taught English in senior high school, which, and both years I thoroughly enjoyed. But after that, like everyone else, I was pressured to sort of succeed in the world, quote unquote. So I
Right.
decided to go for a marketing job. I went to San Miguel. I was
Mhm.
working in the Magnolia division then. There was a Magnolia division in San Miguel then. And I was
Oh.
in charge of the fruit juices. So I was doing marketing work for 2 years. I really liked it, and I enjoyed the work. It was really challenging. It was the best way, I think, to learn how to run a business when you go into brand management.
Mhm.
But I wasn't happy for some reason. I had this angst, and began to look around again and ask myself, what should I do? Maybe I should go back to school and do an MBA, or maybe I should shift career to organizational development. So I was going through this long list of things to do, and the very last item on that list was, maybe you should find out if you're being called to be a priest. No, so, and
Mhm.
I figured at that time that I was, what, 26, I think. I thought, if I don't resolve this question now, it's now or never. So it's better to resolve it and get it out of the way. That was my mentality. But one thing led to another, and I figured that I was being called, so I entered. And when you join the Jesuits, you're exposed to a lot of things, because they want you to find out where you're called to serve. So,
Mhm.
and that's what happened to me when I was doing my regency, we call it, which is about the fourth year after you enter the Society of Jesus. The provincial, my superior, my big boss, asked me, would you like to spend a couple of years in Taipei, where we have a production center? No,
Mhm.
the Jesuits only had two production centers there then, no? One in Taipei and the other one in Yogyakarta. And since I spoke a little bit of Mandarin, the Xavier School brand of Mandarin,
Right.
they said, maybe you can go to Taipei. So I said, yeah, why not, right? I mean, why not? So I went to Taipei, and trained in communications with this great Jesuit, the late Jerry Martinson, who died a couple of years ago, who became a good friend of mine. And I really enjoyed it. So when I came back, my first assignment when I was ordained was to run Jesuit Communications, and that was a time when we began producing, music videos, religious music videos, and some TV shows, and so on and so forth. And I really enjoyed it. But after 4 years, I was kind of tricked into going to Xavier School.
What do you mean tricked?
Well, because my provincial said, the current director is kind of sick and he needs to take a break. Can you
Mhm.
just spend 1 year there? At that time, I was scheduled to go to Edinburgh in Scotland
Okay.
for studies in media. I was going to do my doctorate in media studies. So I said, okay, why not 1 year? That's going to be fun. Xavier School. I love Xavier. I know all the people there. So I went back for 1 year, and a school director or president. And After 1 year, the provincial said, maybe another year. So after the second year, I said, he told me maybe another year. So at that point, I said, this guy isn't gonna take me out of Xavier School. So I did two things. Then I told him, why don't you just give me a full term so that I can make more decent plans for the school? Because at that time, I was very hesitant to make big changes because I wasn't sure I was gonna stay.
Right.
The second thing I did was to change my bed because the bed that I had in the Jesuit house in Xavier School was the infirmary bed, the hospital bed, the kind you kind of crank up
Oh,
and
so
down.
uncomfortable.
And I never changed it because I thought I was gonna leave anyway. But after the third year, I kind of caught on and said, I'm gonna be here for a while, so I better change my bed. So and I ended up staying in Xavier School for 12 years, and those were some of the best years of my life because I met some of the best people, students, faculty, parents, and I think we made some big changes in Xavier, which I was really proud of because we had a great team. People were very open, so that's basically what happened to me. I was just basically open all the time. Every time somebody asked me or my superior asked me if I was open to doing something, I just said yes. Basically.
What I really appreciated about that quick sharing was how open you were to things. I think that was the biggest thing that led you to where you are eventually now. Starting from psychology, going into Magnolia, then just comment to Savior School. I guess you were just very open with all these things.
Yeah, because opportunities come and when opportunities present themselves, you sort of have to say this must be a hint from God, right? So
Hmm.
a recent example is like we've always wanted to help public school teachers, but we didn't really know how, So we've been racking our brains. How do we do this? But very recently, we got an offer for a prime time slot every day from Monday to Friday for free for 30 minutes from 6 to 6:30. So we decided to put up a radio show. So again, that was not really part of our plan, but because the opportunity presented itself, we just said, why not give it a try? I don't know if you remember, but on my last year in Xavier School, some of the people in Xavier were asking me, how would you sort of summarize your stint in Xavier? And I said, so I thought about it for a while, and I said, I think two phrases. The first is what if? Just what if we do this? What if we do that? And the second phrase is why not? Why not give it a try? It won't hurt. It might be a mistake, but we'll learn from it. And I think in my work in Savor, but also after that, it's always been like that. It's always been when an opportunity presents itself. Of course, it's worrisome, it's scary, we're not sure. But a good attitude to have, I think, is to ask yourself why not, and just pursue the what if. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but when it works out, it really works out well. So I think that's one lesson I learned from my own experiences.
Right. So what if and why not? Yeah, I think those are very good words to live by, and that affected me, I guess, right now because being 24, there's a lot of different decisions that I have to make in my life in the near future, and I guess having that mentality of what if and why not is something that I could keep with me to looking forward.
Yeah, so I think one of the enemies of like taking advantage of opportunities is our need for certainty. And I've talked about this in my classes. I've always said that certainty is an attachment. It's a myth actually. When you think about it, we're not really 100%. We're never going to be 100% sure about anything,
Mhm.
and it's important to take risks. And I think if we are allergic to taking risks, that's not going to be very helpful.
Yeah, because definitely risks will be scary when you first approach them, but you're never really going to find out what's going to happen until you actually take those risks. And I think I agree that certainty sometimes can be overrated. We're always looking for that sense of security, certainty that we might be doing the so called right thing or the things that people expect us to do. But in the end, we just end up disappointed or angry, frustrated with ourselves.
And certainty is the enemy of progress. Einstein always doubted himself. I mean, Einstein with his great mind, right?
Hmm.
He would always propose a new, like the theory of relativity. He would say, "It seems to me." He was never sure,
Hmm.
but he explored ideas, no matter how unfamiliar or alien they were, even if he wasn't sure. But can you imagine if he was allergic to uncertainty? He would never explore those ideas and we would never have all those breakthroughs. So, really, it's important to be able to take risks.
Yeah, and that was Einstein who was allergic to certainty.
Right, right. And that's a good allergy, I think.
Oh, speaking of things that you were very certain of, I'd like to backtrack a little bit. And when you said that you wanted to do your doctorate in media at the back then when you were in JustCom, right, Father?
Yes, yes.
And but eventually, I do know that you did your doctorate in education.
That's right. Yeah. By the time I did my doctorate, I was already in my 50s, and I didn't really want to do it anymore. But again, my provincial asked me, "Why don't you do this?" And I said, "Of course." I said, "Why not?" Right. So I was doing it part time. I was actually traveling to Singapore and London while I was working in Xavier. I was doing a part time doctorate, and it really served me well. I really enjoyed it because by that time I was kind of clear that this is where my career is going to be. It's going to be in education. It's not going to be in media.
Hmm.
But the wonderful thing is that I draw a lot from my media experience and media training. For example, now in online learning, you have to do a lot of editing of your own lectures, of what you present, the videos, right? So
Hmm.
I'm really ahead of my colleagues in a sense because I had the benefit of training in media. I was basically a video editor when I was in Taipei, which I think is the most difficult and the most crucial part of the production process because that's when things kind of fall together or they don't, right?
Yes.
I had great training in editing. Although at that time we still didn't have digital editing, we had the big analog machines. But all the principles are the same. So it really serves me well, my background in media, even if I had to let go of it as a full time apostolate.
And I really like seeing how media, even it was something in your past and not something you practice so much anymore, you still draw from those experiences. Because being in your class, Father, I remember seeing your visuals and seeing the presentations. They were very easy to digest. It made learning a lot easier just because things were presented in the quote unquote right way, or they became visually appealing for the learner to absorb. And I think maybe your training in media did really help in that aspect.
Yeah, and I worked hard on that. Actually, if you remember in Xavier School, I used to give homilies with PowerPoints.
Yes.
And the reason was I was bored when there was no visuals, and I could
Mhm.
just imagine the 3,000 people in the audience in Sacred School attending mass, listening to this guy on stage so far away, just listening to his words. I just figured, if I were somebody in the audience, I would be bored to tears. So that's always my criterion. Like, how would I feel if I were a student, if I were in the audience? And I always tried to follow that my own gut feeling about what would work for me. And thankfully, most of the time, it also works for other people. Sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm.
Like I fail miserably sometimes, but in general it works because I'm very mindful of what people might be watching out for. So even my slides, I don't like slides with lots of text with no visuals and so on and so forth. So I kind of try to do that.
And Father, would you say now that let's say you because right now you use media a lot in education, but I also know that you're involved in other different things in Asia Pacific and in SALT. Would you say that you'd also use this sort of media background in the things that you do in these different things in your life now?
Well, that's for sure, because really, images are part of our language today, right? I mean, there was a time when people were very partial to just words, whether spoken or written. But nowadays, the image really is part of the medium, really. In fact, it's a primary medium.
Hmm.
So that's why we have all these memes and so on and so forth. And so even in my other works, that's not directly media related. In my teacher training workshops, in the other things that I do, it's like in my homilies, in my blog, the images are always very important. So it really comes in quite handy.
But also, what another thing I'm interested in is right now is how you manage all of these things because you have a lot of different roles, different jobs. But I'm just baffled at how you can manage everything at the same time.
There's actually a phrase for it that I read somewhere. I don't remember the source, but it's called slow motion multitasking.
Okay.
And it's an interesting concept because basically when people think of multitasking, they're thinking of people who are like on their phone and their different devices and
Right.
doing all sorts of work. That doesn't work. Our attention span's limited, and usually you don't end up very productive that way. But there was this author who talked about slow motion multitasking, and basically what he's saying is that you have different projects simultaneously going on. So you work on a project, you're focused on that project, and then when you kind of run out of energy or interest in that project, you move on to another project. No?
Hmm.
And when I read about that, I said, well, this is what I'm doing really. So, like, I have a musical project which I'm working on. I have my online work in Ateneo. I have my workshops in JCAP in Asia Pacific. It's not really like I'm driving myself to the ground. It's like I'm working on my main job, my day job, which is teacher training. And then when I get a little bored or get a little low bat about it, I can move into something else for a while. And actually, this author was saying that slow motion multitasking is a key to creativity, and I think he's right because I don't feel I'm running out of energy. In fact, when I shift from one project to another, my energy gets sort of restored, and I get more creative that way. And while I'm working on another project, ideas are playing in my head unconsciously about the previous project. I don't know if this makes sense to you, but basically, it's good to have a couple of projects or three projects and just sort of work on each one of them. I don't know if I'm making sense to
Yeah,
you.
I think it makes sense because from what I got at least, is that when you start a new project, it's kind of like your energy levels reset. You don't draw the same energy from, let's say, project A. It's not the same energy bank that you have in project B. So it's a totally new energy bank. Is it?
Right, right, exactly. But it's not like the usual notion of multitasking where you're like rushing from one thing to another at the same time. That's not going to work. That's really a myth. That's not something we can do, according to psychologists. So it's slow motion multitasking in a way.
I can actually relate to that personally because I do tend to multitask, but I think the multitasking that I do is I'm on my phone, I'm on my laptop, and doing everything at the same time. So I think that's something new to consider: slow motion multitasking. Right now, what I'm also thinking about is you are a Jesuit priest, of course, Father, and you also teach in UP, which is a secular school. And are there times wherein these two things clash? Are there issues that maybe some students might bring up or talk about? Oh, why is the Jesuit teaching us? Why is a priest? Why is there a priest in the classroom?
I've taught for 4 years, I think, in UP Diliman,
Mm-hmm.
and the course I'm teaching is not religious. I'm teaching science, technology, and society. I teach at the College of Science, and so far I haven't had any complaint because I don't evangelize during class. I don't talk about like I don't preach so that they'll convert. I'm not into that. I don't believe in that. It doesn't work. Hard sell doesn't work for faith. Um, but I'm very upfront about being a priest. On the first day, I say I'm a priest and I'm biased, I'm Catholic, and so on and so forth. And I make fun of it. I mean, I think you were in my class, right? So people know I laugh about it, that I'm very down to earth in my take about the church, about religion. But I'm also very open about my commitments, and I don't apologize for that. I think the students appreciate that you're being honest and that you're not imposing on them as well. So I try to strike that balance. That on the one hand, I'm not there to preach to them to convert them. I'm not interested in that because that doesn't work. But on the other hand, I'm also very honest about my biases because everyone has biases. And it's important to be aware of your biases and to be honest about them and to just say that, of course, as a Catholic priest, this is what I believe in, but I'm not imposing this on you. And a lot of times, even if our subject is science, technology, and society, a lot of times, there are certain opinions that need to be discussed, right? And as I've said in my class very often, it's important that the class is a safe place for the students, that students can express their opinions without being judged, without being ridiculed. But at the same time, it should also be a safe place for the teacher, for the professor. In other words, I should not be judged as well without being given the opportunity to explain. So I think that social contract in the beginning of the school year is very helpful because it clarifies expectations both on the side of the students and on my side as well.
Right. The transparency from the very beginning, right? Like you're saying already that, okay, these are my biases and I'll respect yours, but also please respect what I'm going to say. I think that general safe space of communication and learning.
Yeah, the basic parameter is what I call the two R's. No, there should be reason. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be reasonable, but secondly, you have to be respectful. So in other words, you can use reason to disagree with me, but be respectful, and I will also be respectful to you. And I think so far it's worked. I mean, I've really enjoyed the discussions in class. Our classes are huge because obviously STS is a required course for graduation, right? So everyone has to take it whether they like it or not. But I really enjoyed the back and forth. In class, like we have our recitations, but also on Twitter because if you remember, I used to ask people to recite on Twitter.
And the
And
tweet. Hmm.
I've learned a lot from the students when they tweet about the topics we talk about in class, and people have been very honest. Like I remember last semester, we talked about a very controversial topic. I don't think we did this in your class, but we talked about gender identity, which is a burning issue
Yeah.
within and outside the church. But I told them, let's talk about this, academically, intellectually, honestly, respectfully, and reasonably. And I think it went really well. I learned a lot from the students. I had a
Mhm.
couple of trans persons in my class, and they were also very assertive and vocal, but all of us were very respectful. So I think all of us learned a lot, just tackling these, difficult subjects and engaging in difficult conversations.
And that's so fantastic to hear, Father, that you keep all of these classes very open, very academic, and at the same time very respectful. And perhaps one thing that I really appreciated being in your classes was that openness, that ability for me to speak my mind without being judged, even online, in class, in person. I think that's one thing that many classes, I guess, from my observation, seem to lack, because there are times when the professor would like to impose their own views, and there are other, not just the professor, but even some students would also be very vocal to the point that they disrespect any opposing viewpoint, and I think that's a problem.
But the moment you cross that line of respect, no one's going to listen to you. That's the problem. So, it's always good to be respectful and at the end of the day, people have to give their consent, right, to your
Yeah.
opinion. They have to make a decision. They can just, shut up and nod in front of you and give you all the right answers in the exam, but they won't believe you anyway because they hate your guts because you've been so disrespectful. So it doesn't work. It's not effective.
And being in this state of learning, talking to each other, communicating, is there any ideal state for how we should be learning in the classroom?
First of all, I think both the professor and the student should have intellectual humility,
Hmm.
because the moment you think you know it all, you're never going to learn, right? Both on the part of the teacher and the students. And I can honestly say I've always been very honest. When I can't answer a question, I will always say, I'm not sure, that's a good question, let me see if I can, do some studying before I can, and I'll get back to you. So I think that intellectual humility, which leads to openness, because if you're humble, you're going to be open and you're going to be sincerely interested in the opinions of other people. And I think that listening bit is so crucial. And that's something that we've forgotten, I think, this art of listening. Like many times I catch myself when I'm talking to someone, I'm not actually listening to the person. I'm actually preparing my response,
Hmm.
So I don't know if you have the same experience, but I always catch myself doing that, and I try to stop myself from doing it because it stops me from understanding and learning from the other person when I end up trying to sort of prepare my response. Because what happens is that I become more interested in my performance, in the way I respond to the person, rather than to learn. And I think learning is more important than performance. So this attitude, I think, where you value learning more than performance is very crucial to what you're talking about, the ideal learning situation.
It's more than just preparing, say, for the subject or for an examination. What we should really focus on is what we take away or what we learn from the actual subject, or or the conversation we're having.
Right. And to think about it, to reflect about whatever you've learned. Because if you don't like chew on the things you sort of learned,
Mhm.
you're gonna forget about it, right?
Yeah. And I remember in class, you'd always give us a few minutes or a few seconds or a few minutes to just take everything in, to absorb and to think about what a classmate has said or what you might have just said.
Yeah, I take those breaks partly to catch my breath and get a drink,
Uh-huh.
but also for you guys to think about it.
Right. Talking about learning in the classroom, where, well, obviously that's not an option now. And how would you describe then this shift into online learning, and especially in this time of COVID 19?
Well, I'm a big believer in online learning. I think in Chinese, right?
Mm-hmm.
The word for crisis is wei qi, as
Yeah.
you know, right? So and
Yeah.
and
Wait,
and
see.
that's a combination of wei xian and ti hui, danger and opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity in this crisis. Number one, for faculty, for teachers, to reinvent ourselves and upgrade ourselves so that we can design online learning and deliver it effectively. But it's also a great opportunity for students because students, especially in Asia, we tend to be we tend to have a lot of deference to authority. So we don't really learn to think independently. So I think the
Mhm.
online environment can actually encourage the students to be more disciplined, to be less dependent on the teacher, and to begin to think more independently. So I'm hoping with a proper orientation and a proper discipline, the students will also upgrade themselves the way their teachers are working very hard to upgrade themselves to prepare for this online learning environment. So for me, if an online learning course is designed well, I think students will learn a lot more compared to face to face. A lot of people say, oh, online is second class to face to face. I don't believe in that because a lot of face to face teachers are terrible teachers and
Mhm.
students don't learn. So it's not about the delivery, it's about the design of the course, whether it's online or face to face. There are benefits in face to face learning, there are also benefits in online learning, but the crucial element is not the mode of delivery, it's really the design. And that's the big idea we've been trying to relate to the teachers we're training, that you have to learn how to be an effective designer of learning experiences, whether it's online or face to face. If you do that well online, you're going to be a better teacher face to face.
I think that's something overlooked most of the time because what most people look at really is how this teacher would deliver the class, not so much on how the class is engineered or the class is designed for the learner, right, Father?
Right, exactly. And it's a paradigm shift and people aren't used to it. So it's going to take a while, I think, for both students and teachers to navigate that shift.
But Father Johnny, as much as I appreciate the online learning platform, and I really do see its advantages, because to some extent we've had online learning platforms in your class, because a lot of our recitations, our exercises are done online, even exams, right, Father? We're
Right,
online.
right. I was using the blended learning approach. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But from what I see and what I know is that there are so many people who are having issues with let's say internet connection, how they might be dealing with financial difficulties that they can't afford, stable internet. And how do we address something like that, especially if we want to push this platform of online learning because it has so much potential.
Well, we're in the Philippines, so it's a third world country, and part of our reality is that even in the best schools or even the most expensive private schools, we'll always have students and teachers who have difficulty with internet access. And that's why when we were training our teachers for this shift, this migration to online learning, we always insisted that the defining feature of our online education
Mhm.
was inclusivity. What does that mean? It means that you come up with a video of your lecture, you must come up with a low bandwidth version, which means you have an audio version or you have a transcript that people can download. Another thing is that you have a wonderfully designed online course on Canvas or Moodle or whatever learning management system you're using. You must be able to print it out as an EPUB or a PDF for those who have no access. So that's what we've tried to do. It's not the perfect solution, but we were always mindful of the weakest link in class
Mhm.
because I think it's not fair if we're not mindful of the students who have difficulty with the internet access. When I was teaching in UP, I would have quizzes, right? Online quizzes.
Yeah.
And what I would do is it's a timed quiz. In other words, for 1 hour, the student's supposed to complete answering the questions. And the quiz is open for 4 hours, right?
Yes.
Because we can't open it forever because people are going to find out what the questions are, what the answers are, and so on and so forth. So it's really a deterrent to cheating and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
no fail. Every time I give a quiz, 1/3 of the class would tell me their internet got disrupted.
Yeah.
So what would I do? I would always give them a chance because I mean, even if they're lying to me, even if they're trying to deceive to me, I would rather err on the side of compassion because
Mhm.
you never know, right? So it's always better to be inclusive. I'm not insecure about my teaching, so I don't have to be a terror teacher. I'd like my students to learn and enjoy learning and not be terrorized unnecessarily. If they want to lie to me, then that's fine. But I'd rather err on the side of compassion. So that's what I tell my colleagues today. I said, don't be so obsessed with cheating. I mean, that's the exception. Not everyone's going to cheat. Most of the people are going to try their best to do the right thing. So don't design your class in a way that's going to just suit the exception. So, but that's a paradigm shift as well. A lot of my colleagues are very much obsessed about, no cheating control and all that. But it doesn't work online. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Having this whole paradigm shift, designing courses not based on, so to speak, the negative things that we notice, but rather focusing it really on the learning.
But that really applies to everything else in life. Like if you have policies or guidelines in an organization, you can't craft those with only the anomalies in mind or the outliers in mind, right?
Right.
You're going to make the majority suffer. Like I remember in Xavier School, at that time when I was in Xavier, that was just the beginning of the social media stuff. So there were a lot of new questions that were coming up, like cyberbullying, and we had no policies for that. So we had to like really rack our brains and try to think of how do we handle all these new things that are happening, no?
Hmm.
And one of the guiding principles has always been we can't come up with rules just to address the exceptions or the anomalies or the outliers. We must think of the general public, the general student population. No? Most of them are going to be good kids. Most of them aren't going to go out of their way to violate rules or bully people. So we had to sort of try to strike that balance. And that applies to anything actually when you think about it.
Right. That's so true. Not just focusing things on these anomalies, but really for the greater good, for the general public. Right, Father?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. And so right now, I'm also wondering, given the whole structure of the education right now, what the future of education looks like, rather, for our country now.
Well, that's a good question because the way education will look like in the future will depend on what the country will look like.
Hmm.
And right now, it's really hard to tell. Like, I don't know when things will quote unquote normalize. I think the most optimistic forecast is the end of next year. But in the meantime, people are suffering. Like, I've been meeting with the Department of Education, the different divisions, and some divisions are better off than others. Some of them feel that most of their students can access online courses, but as you can imagine, many divisions are going back to what in Xavier School we used to call learning packages. We would print out the modules, and at the same time there'd be no teacher. The teacher could not interact with the students, so now they're relying on parents, they're relying on barangay volunteers. We don't know how that's going to work. So we don't really know what education is going to look like. But all I can say is that before the pandemic, the central issue for us was quality of education, not
Mhm.
access, because a lot of people could go to schools. The kind of education they're getting, we're not sure, right? But we're not sure about the quality, but at least as far as access is concerned, we're pretty sure we were in the high 90s compared to other countries. No?
Yes.
So we were just going to focus on quality. But now with the pandemic, we have to go back to access. We don't know how many people will be able to access education this year or next year. So we're back to square one in a way. And it's a big challenge, it's a huge challenge. And this whole thing about teaching online or learning online has really put teachers on the line. Like teachers are experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. People complain a lot, students complain a lot about their teachers, and parents complain. But teachers can only do so much as well. We're just trying to figure things out as well as we go along. I always tell my colleagues that there used to be this saying that we'll cross the bridge when we get there. Well, that saying doesn't apply anymore. The more appropriate saying now is we're building the bridge as we're crossing it because we have no choice. We're already there, and there's no bridge. We have to figure things out together. I think that's the best way to capture the educational landscape in the country today, in the world. No, we don't really know. We're trying to figure things out as we're going along, but we can't give up. We just have to try to um, do our best. No, so wish us luck. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yes, good luck indeed, Father. And it's really just our best efforts on the side of the students and on the side of even the teachers, and having this sense of compassion for each other. But we're all facing something new together. It's a brave new world, as they say.
You put it really well. I think both sides should have compassion for the other. So on the one hand, teachers should not be super strict or super controlling or super obsessed with failing or checking out their students.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think students should also be compassionate to their teachers because a lot of our teachers are not millennials, and this brave new world is completely new to them. But I've been so inspired by some of my colleagues, some of even the older ones. They're really trying their utmost. Like the learning management system we're using is Canvas, and
Mhm.
we've formed a team of Canvas coaches in the Ateneo, and because of the older faculty who are unable to keep up with the rest of the pack, we've organized workshops called Canvas in slow motion for them, and
Right.
we've set up like one-on-one tutorials because that's what's going to help them. So really, I'm really very much appreciative and very much inspired by my older colleagues because they're so passionate about teaching. They want to reinvent themselves. They're having a lot of difficulty. They don't have the media background that I've had, so it's really hard. But they're not giving up, and that's fantastic, I think.
Yeah, that really is inspiring. And that's why I was thinking it's so important that it's not just the teachers who understand what's going on, but also the students who understand the teachers because they too are adjusting to this whole new normal. It's not just the students going through this whole thing on their own.
Right? Exactly. Exactly.
I really like the whole topic of education and I see all the challenges and the things we have to face in the very near future. But what also draws my attention now is this new book that you wrote, Father, is called Learning by Refraction. So it's also a book on learning and education. But unlike most books, it's not so much a storybook or a self help or an inspirational book. It's actually a handbook.
Right. Right. Yeah. We want it to be user friendly. Teachers are the busiest people in the world. And this sounds ironic, but I don't think they have time to read too much outside what they need to read for their classes. So we thought we'd come up with something user friendly, something that would sort of just, that would keep things bite sized and that would keep them actively engaged as well. So it's a workbook. There are exercises, there are questions, and if they answer the questions, hopefully they're going to learn. So we thought that would be a better strategy.
Okay, so this book is really meant for teachers to sort of design their classes, help them to become better engineers for their classes, right, Father?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And apart from this book, I know you have many other pieces of writing too. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that, Father.
I think I have a couple of books that are just collections of my homilies. I remember the first one is called 50 something that was done when I was in Xavier School. And that was organized, that was kind of worked on by my friends for my 50th birthday. So they collected 50 of my homilies that they liked and they put it together. It was a fundraiser for something. I don't remember now. So
Hmm.
I have a couple of books on just compilations of my homilies. But I also have one like it's not really a graphic novel, but it's really a homily I gave before that we turned into an illustrated, like storybook. So that's basically what I have. And oh yeah, for my dissertation, I wrote this book that's surely gonna give you a nosebleed, which is so academic and boring, but I had to do it. It's about religious education and critical thinking. That was my dissertation. So it was published by Routledge in London. So I grabbed the opportunity because you don't get an offer like that all the time. But honestly, it's a book for the shelves. It's for academics. It's for scholars. It's not really for toilet reading. It's not something you'd read in the morning while you're in the toilet, right?
So
So
it's not everyday reading,
yeah, it's not
basically.
everyday reading. Not at all. Yeah.
Another thing that sparked my interest is that you have a musical coming up, Father.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed songwriting in the sense that, and when I say songwriting, I'm talking about lyrics.
Uh huh.
I basically write the words, and I have friends who are musicians who sort of collaborated me to come up with songs, and we've written a number of songs in the last few decades, and actually that's probably the uh, favorite kind of work for me, no, because it's amazing how people come up to you and they don't know you wrote a song, but when they find out, they say, "Oh, it helped them at a difficult time in their life." The songs I write are not always explicitly religious. Usually, they're just like about life, about
Yeah.
searching for meaning, and of course for me meaning is God, right? But I don't preach that in my songs, and I think for that reason people are able to relate to the songs, no? So I've always enjoyed that. I've always felt I've always felt affirmed when people would say that the words spoke to them. So that's one reason I went into the musical. The other reason is that the Bible has a lot of stories which people don't really appreciate. No, what do I mean by that? I mean, people don't really appreciate the humanity of the characters in the Bible. They're very human people. They had
Mhm.
their struggles, but we tend to sort of put them on pedestals and just say, well, they were saints, so it was easy for them. But a lot of the Bible characters went through a lot of very human struggles, which all of us can relate to. So I thought, why not tell their stories in a different way, in a way that's more accessible, in a way that's more meaningful, in a way that's hopefully more powerful to the audience. So I thought, why not write a musical? So this idea has been percolating in my head for the past, I don't know, 10 years maybe. I was still in Xavier School when I first thought about it, but I never had a time to really actually work on it. But after I retired from Xavier, I had 3 years overseas. The 1 year I was on sabbatical, and then I did my doctorate, and then I did my tertianship, which is formation. So in those 3 years, I sort of got to begin working on the musical more seriously. So I wrote the script, which needs a lot of revising, which I'm working on once in a while now.
Mhm.
But when I got back from overseas, I started to write the songs with collaborate with musicians, and we produced a concept album because I felt it's important to hear what the songs sound like, so that it'll help us write the script for the musical better. So that's where we are. We're still workshopping the play. We have to restructure, overhaul the script, but the songs have been written, and I'm hoping that it can be produced maybe in a year or two. I don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah, and the songs are on Spotify now, right, Father?
That's right. It's called Chosen, the original musical. So I hope your listeners will listen to them.
Yeah, we should all listen to Father's musical. I think I was at the launch for the Chosen. Yeah.
That's right. A couple of years ago. Yeah.
And are you allowed to say what like a brief idea of what it's like the main story is about? There's the gist
Well, yeah. So I kind of picked a few characters from the Bible, and it's like Into the Woods. If you're familiar with Into the Woods, fairy tale characters,
where they all meet each other,
yeah,
right?
they kind of step out of their stories and they meet each other, and something else happens. So that's what happens in Chosen. You have Cain and Abel, David and Bathsheba. You have the prophet Jonah. You have who else? A few other people, Sarah, Abraham, and Isaac, and they kind of stray out of their stories and they bump into each other, and hopefully that leads to something interesting. So that's the idea.
Okay, so any expected time that we can see this musical, roughly?
Probably a year or two, because yeah, it needs a lot of work, I think. Which I think, because as you know, writing is 99% revision. So the script has to be revised. Everything's there already. We have to edit out and we have to revise. My favorite writing teacher in college told me that the secret to good writing is to write in white heat and to edit in cold blood. So editing in cold blood is not easy when you've worked so hard on something. So yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're so attached to the word, you don't want to just scrap it out, right?
Right, right, right. So it's good to be away from it also. So slow motion multitasking really helps because it gives you perspective because you're not just focused on one thing.
Yeah, in a sense, you sort of take a break from what you were looking at and look at it with fresh eyes again.
Right, right. Like when you get sick of it, you take a break from it and you come back to it eventually, hopefully.
And really, Father, the power of your writing, the words, and how you say it helps people get through difficult times. Yeah, I can personally attest to that because I think there's a song where the lyric goes, "In time I'll find my place in the greater scheme of things." So that I think that was very reassuring for me to hear, especially in times when I had to make big decisions. And I think these are things that everybody can relate to, making big decisions. And your songs really do embody that sort of that sense of searching or journeying.
Yeah, I think it's partly because I really write for myself as well. No? So in a way, when you write something, you sort of clarify your feelings, your experiences. I think maybe that's why a number of people are able to relate to the songs because I'm writing because I want to remind myself about those things as well. I guess what I'm saying is that it's an authentic place that I'm coming from. It's not something I'm not performing. I'm basically sharing where I've been myself. So that's why.
And speaking of things that we tell ourselves and things that we need to hear, I guess one last question, Father, before we cap off. One thing I want to ask you is what's one thing that listeners have to hear right now that isn't said enough?
Hmm. Well, because we're in this lockdown, many times we're left to our own thoughts, right? And like we think a lot, and when we're too much in our head, we can end up elsewhere, right? I think the one thing that has helped me, because I think it's normal to expect yourself to crash once in a while during this pandemic.
Mhm.
Psychologists tell us that our energy level is probably half their normal level, and it's absolutely normal for someone to crash maybe once a week. By crash, I mean not feel like working, to question things, to doubt their future, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely normal to feel that way. So that's important. No? But I think the one thing that, if I have to answer your question, the one thing that maybe needs to be said more often is that we're not our thoughts. We should not be defined by our thoughts, because our thoughts come from everywhere. It'll be a huge mistake if we allow every single thought to define us, or every single thought to make decisions for us. So, for example, if I wake up today on the wrong side of the bed, and I don't feel well, I feel discouraged. Usually, when we feel that way, there are accompanying thoughts that, what's the point? What's the meaning of this? It's all useless, and so on and so forth. And our natural default is to listen to those thoughts and let them affect us even more. But I think one of the things I've learned in Ignatian spirituality, which is the spirituality of the Jesuits, is that you can choose your thoughts. You're supposed to discern which of your thoughts you're going to allow to affect you, and which of your thoughts you're going to allow to define you. And there's a certain sense of liberation there. And so during this pandemic, when most of the time we're left on our own and we get lost in our own thoughts, and it's such a big temptation to get lost in our thoughts and be discouraged by our negative thoughts, I think that's a very refreshing message that we should remind ourselves about, that we can choose our thoughts, that we are not our thoughts. Our thoughts come from everywhere, no? And not always from good places. So we actually have a choice. When we recognize a thought that's not going to lead us somewhere good, we can actually say, I'm not going to listen to this thought. I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm going to change that thought. And I speak from a place of experience. I struggle with that. And I notice that as you practice that more, you get better. So I think that would be the one thing I'd like to sort of maybe leave with the audience, that you can choose your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. And God has given us the freedom to define ourselves. No, we don't have absolute freedom. We can't, just be who we want to be completely, but we have that elbow room. And I think in this pandemic, it's very crucial to be conscious that we are greater than our thoughts and we can make those choices.
Yeah, that's something definitely very powerful, especially for us right now, given the situation, the kind of life that we basically are in nowadays. And so, thank you so much for that, Father. And really, also, thank you for this conversation that we've had today. Personally, I've learned a lot from listening to you. And I'm sure everyone out there listening today learned a lot as well.
I hope so.
And it's been so much fun and hearing from you again, too, Father. And I really admire you sharing your thoughts and gifts to everyone else. And I guess that's really something that we can look up to. The idea of opening ourselves up to the choices we have, deciding what we are and what will be, and not letting our thoughts define us.
Yeah, and it's always been a pleasure to talk to you, Jeff. And this actually turned out to be more fun than I expected. So thanks for inviting me to your podcast. And I wish you well. I hope the podcast will reach more people, and I hope this particular episode will at least help some people.
Yes, I'm sure it will, Father. Thank you so much for your kind words. And is there anyone else you want? Maybe you want to shout out someone over there. You can say hello.
Well, I just want to say hello to all my colleagues, my fellow teachers who are struggling hard to teach online, or to teach their students in some way. We're all trying to we're all fumbling as we go along, and we're all trying to figure things out, and it's absolutely okay. We're in this together. So that's the one thing I want to say.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for that. And all right, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode with Father Johnny Go. Thanks for spending some time with us today. And until next time, this is Hear Him Out.